Hi. So who am I and why am I standing in front of you talking? So I've been working in games development for 15 years. And I've worked on more than 20 released titles. When I put commercial, I mean games that have been released out to the public and some people have bought them. In some cases, very few people have bought them and played them. And then on top of that, some games that don't get released as well. I've worked at a lot of different companies, probably 5 companies that other people ran, and then 2 companies that I ran. And then, if I'd been doing this talk a few years ago, I would have got all the way to the end of it, and I would have said that my dreams for the future would be that I'd want to start my own company. But that's now at the front of the talk, because that's what I do now. So I've tried it a couple of times, didn't work so great the first time, did it a second time, and now it's been going for 3 years, and so that's going quite well. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. That's the company. Furious Bee. So I've been asked to talk about some of my earliest memories of gaming. So I've got a big family, and all of the computers would get passed down. So I had like a Commodore 64, an Amiga. These are like in the 80s. I used to play Nitro with my brothers, which was a racing game. Especially like the night levels where if you crashed into something, your headlights would smash, and then you literally couldn't see what was happening or where you were in the level. It was really very basic. It would just basically be rendered black, apart from a circle around the front of your car. And Settlers was an RTS where you joined up the paths between buildings, and so you had to like place a woodcutter and a sawmill, and the little guy would come out of the hut and cut some trees down and take it to the sawmill, and then that would be used to build a house. And they'd all transport stuff around. And that was the first game where I wrote to the developer to say, thank you for making this game, I really like your game. And they sent me a poster. So that's probably the first time I realized that people made games. And it wasn't just something that came on your computer. And then I also did do some typing in programs from magazines as well. But I mean, I wouldn't... you can't really call it programming because it didn't make any sense. It's just strings of letters and numbers. And if you've got, you type in a whole A4 page of tiny print, and if you just got one of those wrong, then the whole thing wouldn't work. And then probably the earliest memory that I've got of playing games was on my Commodore 64. And that I couldn't really tell you what any of those games were. All I remember really was loading the games from a tape. And I'll show you what a tape is in a minute, in case you don't know. But when you pressed play on it, you had to creep really carefully around the room, because if you made any noise or trod on a floorboard and it hit it, then the whole thing would just fail. And it would take... I mean, in a child's world, it just took hours and hours and hours. I would just go to sleep, basically, and then hope when I woke up that it would work. So this is what it looked like. That's what you put the tapes into. And then, in case you didn't know, that's what a tape looks like. So, they literally had games recorded onto these. So my route into the industry, I went to university as well, but it's probably slightly different again. So at school, I'm really heavily dyslexic, so at school I wasn't any good at anything at all, apart from art. So when I left school, I had 1 GCSE in art, and I thought, well, art's probably the thing that I have to do. But I did a business GMVQ because I found that quite interesting, and I'd sort of started to come up with coping mechanisms for dyslexia as well. You never grow out of it, but you just work out these sort of ways of helping yourself. And computers, sort of at this point in my life, computers have started to appear as well. And that's a really, really big help, because you've got a spell checker on there, and being able to type stuff out as well was much, much easier than trying to write it. So I did a business GMVQ where I did marketing, and I found marketing quite interesting. And because I had that art GCSE, I had a portfolio of work, and I managed to blag myself onto an art degree. But usually you need like 4 GCSEs at least to do a degree, but I just went, like with art, you can just blag your way onto it. So, but that didn't work out. You see, what they do, it was a lot about conceptual art, and I'm a bit of a control freak. And they would get me to like put a beach ball in some paint and throw it at the canvas, and then talk about what you'd created. And I just couldn't get on with it at all. So I put foundation art degree because I never did that art degree. I never started it. I just thought I've made a massive error and I need to rethink my life. So what I did actually is I decided, I really enjoyed marketing when I was at school, and I did a GMVQ in business. So I thought I'll try and do marketing degrees. But I could see that computers were going to be the future. So I thought, to make myself more employable, I'll just put the minor down as computing. So I'd have some computing skills as well. But just for one of those degrees, which was Middlesex University in London, the major looked really, really interesting. And some of the modules were 100% coursework. And being dyslexic, I really don't like doing exams at all. So I thought 100% coursework modules, and they sounded really super interesting. So just for that one degree, I swapped the major and the minor around the other way. And that was computer science. And I didn't really know what I was letting myself in for, and I didn't really know what programming was, because although I'd been typing those programs in from magazines earlier, I'd never really made the connection between this degree that I was applying for and those programs that were in magazines. So I went to this degree, and when I started, I sat down in the first class, and someone sat down next to me, and they said, "How much programming have you done before?" And I said, "None." I don't know what it is. What is it? And they went, "Oh my God, you've made a massive mistake. We've all done programming before, and it's really, really hard. You're going to find it really difficult. If you've never done it before, you're not going to be able to do it at degree level." So I'm not going to be beaten that easily. So I went away, and I went to the library the next morning, and I got all of the books out and started studying all of this stuff. And 6 months later, that guy was dropping out because it was too hard. And I was top of the class and doing the next year's work because I'd got bored and finished all of this year's work. So do you know what? I think the moral of that story is that if anyone's having a hard time at school at the moment, or if there's some stuff that they don't like, first of all, the environment that you learn in at university is really, really different to what school is like. It's so different. It's like, and it's an adult environment. And I've always looked at it as a stepping stone to independence. You know, I would advise, I mean, it's expensive these days. And some would argue that maybe you don't necessarily need a degree, but I think that it gives you so much more than just the subject that you're learning. You know, it's a really amazing experience, and it is nothing like school. And also, just because some people find something hard doesn't mean that you're going to as well. Like, for some reason, programming's just clicked with the way that my brain worked, and it was just easy for me when other people found it difficult. So what is programming? So earlier, we saw like a big thing with scripting with a sort of visual interface of logic. And I do a similar thing to that, except that I type it in with the keyboard. And I find it really frustrating when I'm trying to use a visual one, actually, because when I'm using Visual Studio, which is what I use to type in programming, then it always comes up with what all of the things are available for me to type. You start typing and it guesses what you want to type and starts helping you fill it in. Whereas whenever I use a visual thing, I'm like, well, now I need to know what things are actually called. So I find it quite frustrating. So this is a really, really simplistic program. All this would do was just print out that string. But this is essentially an example of the kind of thing that I do. And then what we do essentially is we take the input, so whether that's a keyboard or mouse or a gamepad or a dance mat, or literally any kind of input that you have going into a PC, will take that, look at what the input is, analyze it, create some kind of response for the player, and then render that to screen. And that's essentially what programmers do. But it's just the same as designers as well. There's like a lot of different roles in programming, and especially the same thing is true. The bigger the company, the more specialized people get with their roles. So some people will just be doing AI, some people will just be doing audio programming, and some people will be doing the UI, like the sort of presentation that you see on the screen, and some people will be doing the gameplay. And I would say that I've spent the majority of my career doing the UI, doing the presentation, and doing the gameplay. So so essentially, I do problem solving. That's what it comes down to. A designer usually will come to me and go, "I want to do this crazy thing." Sometimes it will seem impossible, and you've got to try and think of a way to do that thing that seems impossible, especially if no one's ever done it before. You're like, right, how do you do that thing? It involves a lot of maths, and these are the languages I use. I use C++ and C#. And then later on as well, I've sort of moved into lead roles where I spend time managing other programmers and actually doing less programming myself and looking after a team of people. So communication is really important. Being able to write documents, the computers really help with that too. And also just talking to people and reviewing people, having a look at their code and giving them feedback on what they're doing. And then now running my own company as well. So I can talk about that a little bit later. So this is just for comedy purposes, really. This is some maths. If maths worries you, if you're thinking about becoming a programmer, but the fact that it's got a lot of maths in it worries you, then I would say don't worry about it, because again, this is a difference with school and learning later on in my life. When I was at school, maths was really, really hard and I didn't get on with it. The first time I took a GCSE in maths, I got an F. But now I use it every single day as part of my job. And the amazing thing about a computer is that you're getting instant feedback. You know, like if your character's inside out, then probably the matrices on your animation are wrong, you know. If you're facing the wrong way, then that's your trigonometry, and if something's just in the wrong position, it's probably your vectors. So you're using all of this maths, and the concepts are difficult, but you've got this instant feedback. You know as soon as you've got it wrong, and then you've got these tools to help you debug it to try and work out what's going wrong, and you can look at each stage of the calculations and basically just work out at what point is it going wrong. Just a selection of some of the games that I've worked on. They're here for different reasons. Some of them you definitely won't have heard of, and some of them you might have heard of. So Powerdrome's the first game I ever made. That was my graduate position. I moved up to, as soon as I graduated from my degree, I moved to Sheffield and took my first job at a company called Argonaut. And this Powerdrome was a remake of a 1982 classic. I was working for the guy that had made the original. When he made it, it was just him in his bedroom. And when we were remaking it, it was a big team of people. I don't know, maybe like 20, 30 people, something like that. So that was the first game I ever worked on, and it did get released eventually, and I'm really, really proud of it. And every single time you go into a shop and you see it there, you move it to the front of the pile. One of the coolest things about working on games is seeing your work in the shops and trying to convince people to buy it. You know. It's all right, I don't work here. Just buy this game. You should buy it, it's brilliant. I know it's old. So then I went on to Criterion and worked on a Burnout game. And this was a really cool game, and I loved it. I loved Burnout 3, Takedown. Yes. And I thought, what I'll do is I'll go and work for them, because I loved playing that game. So yeah, that's not such a good idea. So first of all, I learned, working on Burnout, that if you just sellotaped the accelerator down on the controller, they still made it all the way around the track. Which takes some of the joy out of playing that game. So yeah, when I was debugging that, I would just sellotape the accelerator down. And the other thing is that it was a lot of hard work, a lot of hours working on that game. A lot of my life lost to that. But it was cool, and I'm super proud of that. Another one that you might have heard of is Buzz. Some people, for some reason, like when I first started working in games, I thought Burnout would be the one that people knew. I thought Call of Duty would be the one that people knew. But usually, when I bump into someone just randomly, and they ask me what I do, Buzz is the one that they've heard of. So it's got like a controller, quiz questions, and then you can press the buzzer and answer with 4 coloured buttons. And I think people always remember it because it's got this custom controller. And it's just great family fun at Christmas. Or, maybe causes arguments, who knows. And I've also worked on a Call of Duty game. I came up to Leeds, actually, and worked at a mobile studio that was set up by Activision, and that was one of the games that we made, a Call of Duty version, which was top-down, but you could go into first person whenever you wanted to do some shooting. I also ported Her Story, which was fairly popular, won some BAFTAs. So I ported that for Sam. It was originally on iOS and Steam, and I ported it over to Android for him and did some fixes and stuff. And then I'm working on a game at the moment called Run from the Sun, which is my own studio's game. So I do now. What I do is a lot of outsource work. So when someone else needs some help on their game, then I come in, like usually for a little bit at the beginning to help them set it up or design systems, or come in at the end to help them bug fix the game. So when someone needs a little bit of help on their project, then my company comes along and provides some assistance. But Run from the Sun is our own game, and that's what we do in downtime. When we don't have other projects going on, we work on our own game. So here's a little guy from Run from the Sun. For the sake of pictures. So yeah, I've got a lot of roles now. I used to just be a game programmer, and then for a little while I was a lead programmer as well. And then I went back to being a game programmer because I thought, lead programming is really annoying because I love programming and I don't get to do any programming. I just spend time managing people. So I decided to make another change whereby I had to do all of the roles. I had to do the programming, all the programming, and the managing people, although I don't have any people to manage at the moment, but I've got a company to manage. And then I also do the finance for the company, and then operations or business development as well. I've got to go out and find contracts for that outsource work too. So I've got a lot of different roles now, and it's quite intense, but it's got a whole new sort of lease of life, because you're doing it for yourself and it's exciting, and I'm learning new stuff all the time. This is my office. This is where I work from now. You can't fit anybody else in this room. It's like the broom cupboard. So yeah, it's also, this is really tidy here. It mostly doesn't look like that. So what's in the future for me then? So when I first went to university, the lecturer in the Programming 101 said, right, this course is going to get really, really hard. So you've got to just write down the reason why you're doing it. And then when it gets really, really difficult, then you can look back at that and read it and remind yourself, that's your motivation. This is why you're doing it. And when they asked me that, I wrote down in my sketchbook, I want to fill my brain with stuff. And that's still true today. That's what motivates me. That's what I want to do. I'm always learning. I'm always trying to find new things. And I never know enough. Someone else is always going to be bigger and better than you. And I'm always trying to fill my brain with stuff, basically, and that's my motivation. And then the other thing is that I want to make games that win BAFTAs too. I want to make games that get people talking about it. You know, I've worked on a lot of games where they've won prizes and they've been successful and they've had critical acclaim, but there's been a whole team of people working on that. So I think it's going to be really exciting now, where it's just me and maybe some people I hire if I'm lucky and I can afford them. And I really want to make a game that other people are talking about and other people are excited about. And if that results on me having food in my belly and a roof over my head, then that'll also be useful too. So that's basically what motivates me. I want to make games that people love, and I want to fill my brain with stuff. And that's it for me.
Time for one question, then we're going to have a break, and then the next speaker. So, any questions for Lizi? Yep.
I just wondered if the server side is usually done by the studio, or would that be handled by another company?
Sometimes, yeah. I've worked at places where the server side's done by the studio. So, for example, on Buzz. So the question was, is the server side done by the studio or is it done by another company? So it really depends. If you've got a little indie developer, then they're probably going to look to outsource that. Or even now as well, there's a few solutions that you can just buy. You can just buy in and use. There's a few companies that offer gaming backends that that have sort of created a system that make it easier to do the backend for you. And I've done sort of the back end of leaderboards a few times myself, just because of the filling my brain with stuff thing. And then when you've got a big team of people, then they might do the back end themselves as well. Although more and more, I think they're buying in solutions that already exist.
Cool. Thanks, Lizi.